They came from the edge of nothing, from regions where the stars thinned, and even galactic cartographers marked only silence. The Koruk Dominion did not negotiate. They arrived with fleets of black metal hulls and planet-cracking weapons, speaking no language, issuing no warnings. Their first act was always destruction. The second was always domination. The first system they took, Veltron Minor, never even had time to send a distress signal. 3 inhabited planets, a dozen moons, and 100 orbital stations disappeared beneath kinetic orbital strikes. No demands, no claim, just silence, then ash. By the time nearby systems realized what had happened, the Koruk were already moving outward, consuming territory with unrelenting precision. Trade lanes collapsed, refugee corridors clogged. The galactic community, long peaceful and growing complacent, floundered. The Koruk had no interest in diplomacy, no need for it. They weaponized fear. Survivors spoke of scorched cities. Biological horrors unleashed to liquefy defenders. Mind-shattering frequencies broadcast across occupied worlds. They would often leave a single survivor, left to crawl through ruined streets, driven half-mad, carrying a message without words. Submit or burn. The Tharaki Confederation tried to parley. Their ambassadors were sent back, crucified on the hulls of their own diplomatic vessels, which were then launched at civilian colonies. The Council of Unity voted to deploy joint defense fleets. 2 armadas vanished in the Veiled Nebula, never reaching their targets. Surveillance drones captured brief flashes, ships tearing apart mid-space, strange energy signatures tearing open space-time like canvas. Entire species vanished. Some, like the Amari, detonated their own suns to prevent falling into Koruk hands. Others submitted, sacrificing millions to buy years of survival. Slavery became standard. Resistance became myth. Even the mercenary guilds turned down contracts involving Koruk targets. They called them untouchable. They had rewritten the balance of power. Historians would later call it the Black Expansion, 100 years compressed into a single generation of bloodshed. The galactic economy reoriented itself around survival. Science slowed. Art vanished. Border worlds became fortresses. Core worlds turned xenophobic. Entire cultures inverted their values. Strength was no longer condemned. It was worshipped. And the strongest were the Koruk. Whispers circulated of their origin. Some said they were born in a region of space where physics behaved differently, where entropy ran backward, and matter was older than the universe. Others claimed they were survivors of a collapsed universe, refugees turned conquerors. No origin was confirmed. The Koruk never explained. They only conquered. There were planets that submitted preemptively. Never having seen a Koruk ship, they burned their own records, renamed their cities in the Koruk dialect, and erect statues to beings they'd never seen. Fear became self-sustaining. Children in fringe systems grew up worshipping them as gods. In all this, one system remained quiet, the Terran sphere. At first, it was thought to be extinct. Old archives noted humanity's brief participation in the Galactic Observation Initiative centuries prior, but there was no recent contact. Their beacon had gone silent, their embassies abandoned. The assumption was extinction through internal collapse or natural catastrophe. Koruk scouts ignored it, marking Earth and its surrounding colonies as irrelevant. Its lack of diplomatic connections, absence from trade networks, and non-existent military presence rendered it a non-threat. The Koruk did not waste resources on ruins. But then a border skirmish spilled into the sole expanse. It began with a minor pursuit. A rebel fleet fleeing Koruk enforcers disappeared near Terran space. Koruk warships pursued, assuming they'd find a temporary haven or cloaking field. What they found was a listening post, a human one, small, unmanned, left drifting near a brown dwarf. The Koruk destroyed it on principle. A message from their command chain: cleanse the system, leave nothing unburned. A task force of 3 capital ships and 6 support cruisers was dispatched. They passed the Oort cloud with no resistance. By the time they reached Neptune's orbit, the first went dark. The others assumed an anomaly, continued forward. The second was vaporized near Mars, never detecting the planetary railgun buried within the Phobos mines. The third managed to reach Earth's orbit and fired a warning shot. It was the last thing it ever did. There were no human ships in sight, no defenses visible. But the Koruk vessel simply ceased to exist, ripped from space by an unknown force, its last sensor log filled with incomprehensible static and brief flashes of light that bent around nothing. It was a minor event in the eyes of the Koruk Dominion, a simple oversight. 3 ships lost, likely to ancient automated defenses. They logged it, dismissed it. 3 weeks passed. Then a message arrived across the entire Koruk network. Simultaneously, it overrode encryption, bypassed isolation protocols, and played across every screen in every Koruk facility. It said, "We receive your message. This is our reply." There was no origin tag, no signature, no response channel, just silence. The first human action was small, surgical. 2 Koruk outposts in the Andrus Rift were hit simultaneously, not destroyed, emptied, entire garrisons missing. No bodies, no alarms. Drones captured nothing. Internal security found only one thing. The Koruk War banner, burned and buried in the command chamber. Koruk commanders reacted with disdain. Isolated incidents, rogue factions, perhaps even internal rebellion. But then it spread. 12 supply convoys vanished in a single day. One moment, broadcasting standard route telemetry. The next, gone. No debris, no signals, no demands. On the 13th day, a forward operating base on Zarkin for detected strange readings. By the time analysts reported the anomaly, half the planet was gone, sliced cleanly by a spatial rift. The survivors were infected with nanites that shut down their nervous systems one by one, forcing them to witness their own dissection. By now, the Koruk military machine had begun to react. Threat matrices were updated. Resources were diverted. A full fleet was sent to investigate Terran space. They did not return. An emergency summit was called on Koruk Prime. Intelligence officers presented fragments of data. Human technology had evolved in secret. Their understanding of spatial mechanics, computational warfare, and biological augmentation exceeded anything previously observed. They operated without signature. They engaged only when victory was absolute. And worst of all, they did not communicate. There were no negotiations, no ultimatums, no declarations of war. Just action, cold, surgical, overwhelming. Psychological experts warn of something worse than military defeat, conceptual collapse. The Koruk had built an empire on the premise of fear. But this new force did not fear them. It ignored their threats, laughed at their displays, struck only when unprepared. Worse still, they were unpredictable. The Koruk understood conquest. They understood power. But this was vengeance. The Koruk response was immediate and absolute. The High Command declared a state of total war. Entire sectors were locked down. Civilian movements were restricted. Every ship in their vast armada was recalled, refitted, and reassigned to counter the Terran threat. Billions of resources were rerouted overnight. Every world under their control began building, digging, preparing. They didn't understand what they were fighting, but they knew it was human. Massive intelligence operations were launched. Entire AI clusters were tasked with decrypting human signals, locating bases, reverse engineering capture fragments. Nothing worked. Human systems ran on layers of logic they couldn't untangle. Quantum encryptions led to recursive traps. Attempts to trace signal origin triggered localized blackouts in Koruk networks. Human intelligence infrastructure wasn't just secure, it was actively predatory. In desperation, the Koruk offered bounties, alive, dead, or data, anything with Terran markers. That led to a wave of false reports, disinformation, and ambushes. Independent agents were lured by credits and found only silence or death. Human operatives were already among them, feeding false intelligence, rerouting entire fleets into ambushes. At first, these attacks were invisible. A logistics hub gone, a weapons factory exposed to vacuum, a command center's oxygen scrubbers subtly failing during a strategy meeting. None of it screamed warfare, but the pattern grew. It was unmistakable. systemic, intentional. The Koruk began to fear information itself. What truly broke their strategic momentum was the human psychological warfare. Not propaganda, raw truths. Recordings of Koruk atrocities streamed directly to their subjugated populations, edited with precision, overlaid with the words of the victims, sometimes with a single phrase repeated. We remember. Uprisings flared. Entire planets revolted simultaneously. Koruk garrisons were overwhelmed, not by superior force but by sheer coordination. It became clear the humans had seeded rebellion years earlier, waiting for precise moment to activate. Even species believed too broken to resist rose again, armed with human weapons and impossible knowledge of Koruk security systems. Commanders began executing their own soldiers for fear of infiltration. Paranoia crippled the hierarchy. Loyalty could no longer be guaranteed, not when the enemy knew their language, their codes, even their dreams. Human infiltration had reached cultural levels. Music from Earth played on black market stations. Phrases like "no more chains" and "we're the reckoning" spread like fire. The Koruk deployed memory scramblers. They banned certain frequencies. They burned libraries and executed scholars. None of it worked. The damage was done. The idea had taken root. And yet, the humans hadn't even begun their real offensive. The first confirmed sighting of a Terran fleet was catastrophic. Koruk Sector 9B, believed to be impenetrable, fortified with layers of defenses, was reduced to molten slag in 11 minutes. The footage leaked later showed no large ships, no known human vessels, just flashes in the void, weapons discharging faster than sensors could register. Entire flotillas vaporized mid-sentence. The humans used no standardized formations. Their ships weren't identifiable by class. Some were biological, others crystalline, some seemingly constructed from folding geometry that defied physics. The Koruk couldn't adapt because nothing repeated. Each strike was unique. No engagement looked like the last. Doctrine failed. Simulations collapsed. War had become unknowable. Desperation drove the Koruk to awaken the vaulted minds. Ancient hyperintelligences sealed away for fear of their corruption. They were unleashed and tasked with identifying human strategic intent. Within a week, 2 of the minds went dark. The third transmitted a single sentence before self-deletion. They are not playing the same game. Attempt to retaliate focused on Earth's location. Scout teams combed every system. They found ruined decoys, shattered satellites broadcasting static, and orbital husks filled with dormant weaponry. One team discovered a seemingly pristine world. Human architecture intact, lush terrain, signs of habitation. They landed. None returned. When a recovery drone arrived months later, it found the team still alive, eyes wide, unmoving, catatonic. One was whispering continuously, describing Earth in horrifying, contradictory detail. Cities inside oceans, mountains that sang, stars orbiting people. The drone self-terminated rather than bring the data back. Speculation grew. Earth was not a planet. It was a trap. The Koruk war effort collapsed inward. Sectors stopped receiving orders. Command centers went silent. Wormhole gates destabilized. Massive fleets disappeared in transit. Later analysis revealed human manipulation of gravitational paths, turning hyperspace itself into a weapon. The void between stars had become human territory. But the worst came from within. Modified Koruk defectors, cybernetically enhanced, mentally altered, began sabotaging their own infrastructure. Sleeper agents, conditioned for years, activated en masse. They weren't killing. They were disabling, turning off, making the machines go quiet. Koruk Prime attempted a planetary lockdown. It lasted 9 hours. The power grid collapsed. AI oversight systems crashed. Entire continents went dark. For the first time in known history, the Koruk homeworld was vulnerable, and the humans didn't strike. No orbital bombardment. No mass invasion. Instead, they sent a single message. You showed us what fear looks like. Now we return the lesson. That was the first signal broadcast across the galaxy not in Koruk dialect, but in Terran standard. Resistance spread faster than ever before. Even those who had never known humans felt the shift. Terror had changed shape. The apex predator of the galaxy had found its hunter. The last fully functional Koruk fleet was called the Obsidian Corps, 80 capital ships, 10,000 support vessels, and 30 billion troops. They were ordered to locate and destroy any Terran presence near the Argoni cluster, where several relay stations had gone silent. They arrived to find a single Terran ship, hovering motionless, unarmed, broadcasting music. They approached. It didn't move. Closer. No change. They surrounded it. That's when the feed went black. 7 minutes later, every ship in the fleet reported internal anomalies. Gravity fluctuated. Power surge failed, return in bursts. Crew began reporting hallucinations, visages of Earth, voices in forgotten languages, names they had never known. Entire decks twisted inward, like the ships themselves rejected their inhabitants. Within 15 minutes, the Obsidian Corps had ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not defeated, erased. The only trace was a repeating signal across the abandoned relay stations. A phrase in every language known to the galaxy. Retribution is not revenge. It is balance. Panic was no longer confined to command. It infected the citizenry. Koruk-controlled worlds declared independence, not to rebel, but to avoid being seen as part of the Dominion. They changed their banners, erased Koruk symbols. Some pleaded directly to the Terrans, begging for mercy, offering tribute, access, servitude. They received nothing. Humanity didn't conquer. It corrected, and then vanished. No further attacks. No demands. No broadcasts.